Welcome everybody to lecture 3 of week 1. We are going to be going over the scientific method. And the scientific method is fairly basic and easy to understand, but you should note that the order of the procedure becomes very important later on. So, what is the scientific method? By definition, it's a method of procedure that has characterized natural science since the 17th century. It consists in the systematic observation, measurement, and experiment, in the formulation, testing, and modification of hypotheses. There are 7 steps in the scientific method, and they should be followed in order. Step 1 in the scientific method is make an observation. When this occurs during a scientific method, you will naturally observe something that piques your interest, and this naturally brings rise to questions about what you have just witnessed. Using an example of Charles Darwin and his finches, Charles had observed these birds on an island, and the birds were similar yet different. They were all finches, but they had different appearances, colors, patterns, etc. So his observation was that the birds were similar, yet they were different. But why were they different? Step 2 of the scientific method would be to form a question about your observation. So, for example, you see all these finches. Different finches are different sizes. Their beaks vary. Some have short, stout beaks, some have long, thin beaks. So perhaps a question you would form about your observation here would be, why do different species of finches have different beaks? Or, do different beaks have different uses? Like for eating, for example. In this chart, you can see that there was a theory here about different beak sizes that went along with which food that the finch is eating. So seeds, cactus, insects, plants, and it varied. Step 3 of the scientific method is to form a hypothesis. And a hypothesis is an idea that is suggested as an explanation for an event that has been observed. So, you have observed the different variations in beak size of these finches. You have questioned it, and now you are going to provide sort of an idea that serves as an explanation. A hypothesis must also be testable. It must be supported or falsified by an experiment. And Darwin's hypothesis in the case of the finches was that all species of organisms arise and develop through the natural selection of small, inherited variations that increase the individual's ability to compete, survive, and reproduce. So let's take a look at this photo on the right here. In the middle here, we have a seed-eating finch from the mainland. We'll start there. Now, over time, depending on resources and other environmental factors, this finch has split off into two different species of finches. One being a more thinner-beaked insect-eating finch, and on the left, more of a seed-eating finch. So if we're talking about the left-hand side here, this large-billed finch may continue to eat seeds. Lots of competition among seed-eating finches. Many did not survive. Population of seed-eating finches remained stable. Therefore, these finches that were eating seeds with the larger bills had adapted to be more successful than the seed-eating finches from the mainland because their bodies were more suited for it. Then on the right-hand side, a few had slightly different beaks. They could eat insects. Far less competition for food among insect-eating finches because they had the thinner beaks and there was less competition compared to the seed-eating finches. Far more of these finches survived. Population of insect-eating finches increased. So, you can see there how over time this adaptation in the finch species could benefit both sides. And over time genetic mutations, which we'll look into much later in this course, explain how you go from the regular seed-eating finch from the mainland to either the left or right finch example in this case. The fourth step in the scientific method is experimentation. Experiments are performed to test your hypothesis, and a hypothesis will either be supported or rejected. You will develop a procedure that states very clearly how you plan to conduct your experiment. It is important that you include and identify a controlled variable or dependent variable in your procedure. Controls allow us to test a single variable in an experiment because they are unchanged. Very important part of experimentation is that you must be able to repeat this experiment multiple times with similar results. Step 5 of the scientific method is analysis. So after your experiment, you're going to have gathered your data. And this is at the point where you will do any calculations you need to perform to support your hypothesis. You'll analyze your data, calculations, any additional information that you think might be relevant to your hypothesis. And then from there you will begin to draw conclusions based on evidence. And all your data should be written down in a laboratory notebook, or in Darwin's case, this very basic notebook that he had at the time. So on the right here shows Darwin's notes regarding the finches. And what you see here is kind of a basic phylogenetic tree, and we will be talking about phylogenetic trees later on in the course, but basically they just show a path of evolutionary change between a species. Step 6 of the scientific method is your conclusion. So you're going to draw a conclusion based on the analysis of the data you've collected during the experimental phase. You will then write a conclusion that includes whether you support or reject the hypothesis which was investigated based on evidence only. You will never include opinions. This will only be evidence-based. A hypothesis will not always be supported, and at times it can be rejected. The seventh and final step of the scientific method is repeat. You must be able to accurately repeat your process and achieve similar results. And that's all I have for you for lecture 3. Make sure if you have any questions you let me know, and I will see you in lecture 4, our final lecture of week 1.